Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto survived the zombie outbreak and won the hearts of Shizuka, Saeko, and Kyoko Part Q. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. A complete and utter ass. If a student of Fujimi Academy were asked to give their honest opinion of one Naruto Uzumaki and they possessed the knowledge of knowing that no harm would befall them from badmouthing the blonde menace, that would be some of the more common responses from the student masses. It didn't matter that the whiskered blonde possessed a body that could cause Greek gods to go green with envy, or that his handsome face could shame male supermodels and draw out swoons from all but the most loyal of married women. It just didn't matter. Naruto Uzumaki was hated by nearly all the students and staff of Fujimi Academy and loved by only a rare few. The reason for why that was the case was quite simple. He was an equal opportunist bully. He didn't discriminate by bullying just the weak. No, he bullied all. He bullied the bullies, bullied the teachers, the average student, the weirdo students, the popular students, even the janitor. Naruto Uzumaki truly meant it when he identified himself as an equal opportunist bully 2 years ago in his homeroom class. The only one excluded from the whiskered blonde's ruthless pranking was the school nurse Shizuka Marikawa, and that was because he privately thought of his fellow blonde as his soulmate. Everyone else didn't have that luxury, and as such, the past 2 years had them either witness an unfortunate soul lose their pride and sanity, or worse. They would be the unfortunate ones who would have their dignity crushed into shambles. Now one would be wondering, how exactly was it that Naruto still remained a student in Fujimi Academy and not suffer a single ounce of punishment? After all, some of the blonde's more extreme pranking. Regardless, it definitely would have resulted in expulsion. The answer to that question was quite easy yet quite mind-boggling. He never got caught. Naruto Uzumaki, who had perpetrated hundreds upon hundreds of pranks in the past 2 years, was never caught, not even once. The only reason people knew it was him was because of his disturbing declaration on his first day of enrollment, something that had to do with him saying that he would make the life of everyone in the building hell for the next 3 years. Well, that and because of the wicked grin that was painted on his visage whenever he got to witness the fruits of his labor happen just as it began to take effect on the unfortunate soul of the day. Or souls. Learning that no matter what happened that the prank king of hell wouldn't get caught, a large group of delinquents banded together and resolved to teach the blonde some manners themselves. The very next morning had found those same delinquents, unconscious, and each of them bent over and strapped to the top rails of the chair while all manners of stationaries were jammed into their rectums. Now would be a good time to mention that scrawled on the upper part of their back, different sentences praising Naruto Uzumaki were written with the use of a permanent red marker. When the large group of delinquents had woken up, they had immediately burst into tears, shoulders quaking uncontrollably as they vividly remembered the unpleasant experience that Naruto had put them through. Seeing the potential in finally outing the prankster menace from the school, the staff questioned the delinquents about Naruto Uzumaki's involvement, feelings of euphoria and satisfaction submerging their existence as they visualized their academy without Naruto's presence. They were left feeling disappointment as the delinquents only cried even harder before all of them swiftly dropped out of the academy, never again seen by the student masses. Since then, everyone never once had entertained the thought about confronting the blonde themselves, none of them possessing the balls to try to reprimand him after what he had done to that large group of delinquents. Only a rare few people were an exception to that rule. Now well into his 3rd year, Naruto walked the hallways of Fujimi Academy, a merry tune dancing on the tip of his tongue as he flashed smiles at the nervous students littering the hallway, chuckling as some of them eeked, while others gained extremely frightened looks. A few even began to sob, much to his amusement. He wasn't that bad. Then again, he couldn't blame them too much considering what he had put them through daily. Currently the whiskered student possessed a mission, an important one. A mission that had him arrive right at the doorsteps of the nurse's office. Silently opening the door and walking inside, he shut it behind him before stealthily ambling his way towards the unsuspecting back of Shizuka Marikawa, a small pout decorating his visage as his favorite nurse wore that disgusting extra-large size lab coat that shielded her fine, huge rump from prying eyes. Once just a step away from having his chest meet her back, he pulled out a beautiful flower before smoothly bringing it underneath Shizuka's nose. Shizuka gasped before a large smile blossomed onto her visage, gently twirling towards her fellow blonde so she could face him. Accepting the flower in hand, Shizuka giggled as she sent an exasperated yet fond look towards her most favorite student. Another flower, Naruto-kun. When will you stop giving me flowers? And it's a lotus flower, I see. Naruto grinned. You know I can't stop giving you flowers every day, Shizuka-chan. I've been doing that for 2 full years now. After all, the most beautiful woman in the world deserves to have her beauty appreciated. An understatement if there ever was one, the whiskered delinquent thought internally. Whether she liked it or not, the fact was, Shizuka Marikawa was a woman that garnered the lust and attention of all the men and women that laid eyes on her. Naruto himself had seen her face a couple hundred times in the past 3 years, and yet each time felt like his first. Stunning, amber-colored eyes peeked out from behind the bangs of waist-length sun-kissed blonde hair. Attached with it was a small button nose that scrunched cutely atop pillowy and plump pink lips, coupled that with Shizuka's sharp jawline, the high cheekbones, and her smooth, light tan complexion, and it all culminated into a heart-fluttering visage that never failed to take Naruto's breath away whenever he laid eyes on her mesmerizing visage. She was, for a lack of a better term, universally gorgeous, as if she was sculpted to be the prettiest thing in the world. That was of course without mentioning her downright sinful body that could draw out perverse thoughts from even the Pope himself. And what happens if you run out of flowers to give? She couldn't help but question amusedly. Every flower he had ever gotten her was unique, never the same as the previous ones. Then I move on to the next most romantic thing, chocolate. Shizuka shook her head, trying her utmost best to suppress her smile and failing miserably as her lips were tugged upwards and wide on either side of her face. You still didn't answer my question, mister. She playfully poked his chest. Why a lotus flower? A lotus flower symbolizes rebirth, a new start if you will. I felt it was only appropriate since this is the start of a new year and the start of a better me. He answered, suppressing the urge to rub the back of his head sheepishly as school had already started nearly 2 weeks ago. A better you, huh? Will you stop bullying everyone this year? She questioned sternly, hands placed on either side of her hips as she gazed up at Naruto's bulky, 6-foot frame. Naruto pouted. You know I can't do that, Shizuka-chan. As I told you before, I'm an equal opportunist bully. HMPH, fine. Then I take it that you will stop your lecherous gaze aimed towards Busujima-chan. Hints of annoyance and jealously marred Shizuka's gaze as she crossed her arms underneath her mountainous bosom. The whiskered blonde chuckled as he wrapped his arms around her and gently pulled her to him, one hand resting in between her shoulder blades while the other was inappropriately positioned on her lower back, just right above where her ridiculously big began to jut and round. Ah, is my Shizuka-chan jealous? Shizuka blushed fiercely, both from her favorite student's bold touch and his teasing question. She shakily placed her hands on Naruto's chest but lacked the will to truly push him away as her favorite pair of baby blue orbs gazed at her with such mad intensity. Naruto, we can't. She weakly murmured, knowing she would be fired immediately if someone stumbled onto them and reported this scene. Naruto pouted but ultimately let go, much to Shizuka's inward disappointment. In my defense, Saeko-chan does have a nice and it's hard not to look when she's bent over. Jealousy crisscrossed Shizuka's features once more as she glared irritatedly at him. My is bigger. She accidentally blurted out before inwardly crying in mortification. Why did she say that? A pervy smile curled at Naruto's lips. I know. His response only caused her to feel even more mortified than ever. I don't think it's appropriate to be discussing this, Marikawa-sensei. A tick mark formed on the nurse's head as she pouted angrily at him. I don't want to hear about this from you. Mirth rumbled Naruto's chest before he hugged the nurse in silent apology. Saeko-chan can be very devious when she wants to be, but I'll try my best not to look. Good. Naruto let go and stepped back. Got to head back to class, but how do you feel about having steak tonight? Shizuka smiled brightly. Sounds good to me. He nodded and walked towards the exit. Oh, and Naruto-kun. Said student paused as he slid the door open, looking over his shoulder and tossing a questioning look at his fellow blonde. His curiosity piqued when he noticed the nurse's flushed cheeks. You and I will be having a long talk about you looking at my butt, young man. Naruto grinned. I look forward to it. He replied shamelessly, grin widening as her blush worsened before he stepped out to the hallway. Waiting until she was sure he was far away, Shizuka sighed exasperatedly before she giggled as she thought of the first time she had encountered that shameless boy. It had been a little more over 3 years ago when she had first stumbled upon him in her first few shifts in the hospital room. Naruto had been 17 at the time and gravely injured, not mentioning that he was battling severe depression, and nothing anybody said or did seemed to snap him out of it. What was worse was that he had no parents or siblings, no relatives, no one to come visit or check upon him. And then learning from her senior colleagues that he possessed no birth certificate, no passport, no piece of identification or home, and it was unknown what happened to the late teenager to cause him to be in such a state. Truly, it seemed like the 17-year-old bedridden blonde had nothing to live for and possessed absolutely nothing that could help him get his life back on track. A hypothesis that proved much to be true when she had personally questioned Naruto, and he mutely nodded before refusing to answer any more of her or her colleagues' inquiries. The thing was, Shizuka was too kind for her own good. It was why she had gotten into nursing and why she was aspiring to be a doctor. Because she cared greatly about people, whether it was those she personally knew or otherwise. Seeing a depressed, bedridden 17-year-old with no family, no home, no financial support so to speak, and knowing that he wouldn't ever be happy with a foster life, if he even got accepted into one, that is, it did it for her. From there she had volunteered to look after the 17-year-old and help him as much as she could, a concept that surprised all her colleagues and even Naruto himself. Once discharged, Naruto had stayed with Shizuka temporarily. The first 4-5 months were especially difficult, as despite her greatest efforts to be close to him, he was hardly receptive. But Naruto couldn't be cold forever and eventually had started to warm up to her and even began to regain the spark to live and move on. It was a work in progress, but she was delighted that he was finally moving on the right path. Shizuka till now had no idea what had caused Naruto to be severely depressed, though she had a few theories, and she was still clueless about how he had ended up in the hospital, but she didn't let her lack of knowledge deter her from getting close to the younger blonde. It was perhaps in the 10th month of living with her that Naruto had finally managed to fully right himself while simultaneously making the decision to release the Ika Ika series to the world. Saying he became rich was putting it lightly. In the span of a single month, he became a multi-millionaire thanks to the release of one of his godfather's pervy books, a rather massive change considering that for quite a long while, he didn't have 2 pennies that he could rub together. Now healthy in both mind and body and being as financially stable as he was, Naruto didn't want to take advantage of Shizuka's kindness and generosity any more than he already had, moving out of the place despite Shizuka's insistent protests that he wasn't an annoyance to her. There was only one small issue with him living on his own: he was still considered underage, and when it came to light that there was no records of him ever going to school, the government had cut him a deal that involved him attending an institution despite him nearing the age of 18, which was the age of third-year high school students. That was the deal he was forced to make: attend in graduate school, and he would be allowed to live on his own even if he was below the age of 20. Shizuka, who was immensely happy by all the positive turns that accompanied Naruto's life, was also very sad deep down, as she had grown quite attached to the late teen that had been living with her for nearly an entire year. It didn't help that he hadn't reached out to her once in the following 2 months after he had moved out. One could only imagine her surprise when on the very first day of the school year 2 years ago that Naruto, who she hadn't suspected would be a future student of Fujimi Academy, had shown up to her office with a large bouquet of the prettiest flowers she had ever seen in her entire life. Naturally, Shizuka had been over the moon that day, not before scolding the boy silly for not reaching out to her at all since he moved out. It was almost funny really. Shizuka had always envisioned herself becoming close to the hospital patients, being their friends and what's not, but she hadn't ever foreseen herself coming to care so much about a specific patient, or ex-patient to be more accurate, like she had with Naruto. She giggled and shook her head once more. It was torture. Listening to that man, Shido, or Sensei Asswipe as he liked to call him, was a man who reminded him too much about that pedo Orochimaru who gave Sasuke that gay hickey when he was 12. Needless to say, listening to that teacher talk made him want to puke. It was a good thing that he was Naruto fucking Uzumaki. If he didn't want to be in class listening to Orochimaru 2.0 talk unadulterated rubbish, then he wasn't going to listen to Orochimaru 2.0 talk unadulterated rubbish. Oi! Naruto suddenly stood up, startling both the teacher and the students. The ones forced to sit next to the whiskered menace quivered in fear. Asswipe sensei, I need a small break. I trust that's not an issue. Shido shook his head rapidly, a terrified smile plastered on his visage. No, I mean of course not Uzumaki-kun, take all the time you need. Naruto smiled so brightly it would have blinded Apollo. Thank you for understanding. He walked away from his seat, smacking the head of a poor guy who was staring a bit too much. Focus on the whiteboard, you dimwit. Fearing that even a word could set him off, Shido said nothing as he and the rest of the class discreetly watched the proceeding, a relieved smile crossing over his and everyone else's features once the prank king of hell was out of the class. Now class, back to what I was saying. Naruto closed his eyes and chuckled from his position out of the classroom, not seeing the need in staying here any longer. The ex-shinobi walked the halls of the academy, determined to get some fresh air into his lungs. 5 to 10 minutes later, he found himself outside the school building. Intriguingly enough, it seemed that he wasn't the only one outside, as a couple of staff including Kyoko, Big Tits, Hayashi and Small Tashima stood by the gates and they were confronting someone. Driven by curiosity, Naruto couldn't help but approach them while keeping a wary eye just in case the situation demanded it. Except the blonde also wanted to get a good look at that round and jutting rear that stretched out Kyoko's skirt. Not that any sane, red-blooded man could blame him. It honestly came as a surprise that Kyoko Hayashi, a woman with a full and voluptuous figure, was single. Then again, he should have expected such a thing as Shizuka, the hottest woman in both this world and the elemental nation, was single too, and that had been the case for many, many years. But back to Kyoko Hayashi, she was a woman of extravagant appearance, with reddish-brown hair that framed a strict yet kind heart-shaped face, big brown doe eyes that hid behind a pair of nerdy glasses. A nice pair of lips on top of an angular and sharp jawline. She was a beauty, certainly easier on the eyes compared to Tashima. Then again, it was easy to have such an opinion since Naruto was a fully straight man. Coming to a stop right next to Hayashi just as Tashima grabbed a hold of the stranger's shirt and slammed him into the gate, Naruto ignored all the uneased murmurs as his gaze narrowed suspiciously. There was something very nauseating about the smell that emanated from the peculiar acting man. Naruto could not ponder any longer as a pained scream pierced his thoughts and returned him back to his senses. What the fuck? Naruto gazed, wide-eyed just like the remaining staff as they witnessed blood gush like a fountain from the stranger biting small Tashima's wrist. So stunned by the turn of events, none of them reacted as Tashima continued to bellow before he slumped backwards and fell to the ground. Kyoko gasped before she quickly ran over to the downed PE teacher, heart thumping thunderously as she hurriedly placed Tashima's head on her lap. Tashima-sensei, wake up. Do you think he's dead? One of the nameless teachers slowly asked his colleague, extremely disturbed. Nameless teacher number 2 didn't get the chance to respond as Kyoko turned in their direction, livid at their question. Of course he's not dead. She thundered angrily before returning her gaze back to her longtime colleague. A twitch. Kyoko exhaled in relief as she noticed the subtle movement coming from the now moving and alive phys ed teacher. Oh Tashima, you had me so whoa. She stopped speaking as Tashima suddenly grabbed her shirt and yanked her down, eyes widening in astonishment as the bitten teacher lounged for her neck. A shower of blood erupted once more as teeth sank into flesh. Naruto grunted in extreme pain. Having noticed the soulless-looking orbs of what used to be Tashima-sensei glinting with hunger, Naruto instinctively crept closer to Kyoko just in time for what used to be Tashima-sensei try to sink his jaws into Big Tits Sensei's neck. Fortunately, Naruto, who had anticipated such a thing thanks to watching so many horror movies with Shizuka-chan of course, reacted much faster and prevented it at the cost of zombie Tashima biting his own forearm instead. Yeah, I don't fancy getting bitten by men, you weirdo. Naruto slammed his fist into zombie Tashima's face, watching with complete satisfaction as the man's dead body was sent flying a few feet away. You Uzumaki-kun, are you alright? Kyoko worriedly asked as she stood up, concernedly gazing at the red bite mark that was decorated on her student's forearm. Naruto hid a wince and nodded. I'm alright, Big Tits Sensei. If it had been any other time, Kyoko would have bristled with anger before lecturing the whiskered blonde about manners and proper conduct. As it was, she could only shakily nod before another scream greeted her ears. Turning towards the source of that ominous sound, Naruto and Kyoko were bewildered to learn that the stranger from outside the gates from earlier had somehow gotten inside and bit nameless teacher number 1 while nameless teacher number 2 fled for his life. Grunting in annoyance, Naruto quickly whirled towards the female teacher, bending his knees as he wrapped his arms around Kyoko's legs and hoisted the startled women over his shoulder. You Uzumaki-kun, what do you think you are doing? She questioned, a color of light pink flushing her visage as Naruto ran back inside the institution. I can run on my own, Uzumaki-kun. No, you can't. You're wearing heels and there's a high risk of you tripping and having those zombies bite you. He replied. Kyoko Hayashi was rendered silent as the blonde did have a valid point, there was absolutely no way she could run in her heels. Unknown to the hoisted woman, there was another reason behind why Naruto had carried her and why over his shoulder. What was that reason, one might wonder? To enjoy the feel of that thick bubble butt jiggling on his face. Was he honest in that he carried her so she wouldn't trip? Absolutely. He wasn't gonna let someone innocent lose their life if he could help it. That said, he didn't see a reason not to enjoy himself as he saved a damsel in distress. Uzumaki-kun, you can let me down now. Kyoko subtly ordered. Naruto complied and lowered the ping-pong teacher, resisting the urge to pout as he rather enjoyed the feel of one of Kyoko's soft, thick cheeks wobbling on his face. Your arm, how does it feel? She worriedly asked before bowing her head sullenly. I am so sorry that you were bit because of me. It's alright, Hayashi-sensei, I do not blame you at all. He easily forgave her, much to her shock and immense gratitude. I've had meaner injuries, but never mind that. I have to go to the nurse's office and protect Shizuka-sensei. I take it that you wish to go to the principal and inform him of this development. He crossed his arms and stared at her expectantly. Kyoko nodded. I must warn him so he could announce and notify Eve. She was cut off from her speech as the principal's voice rang across the school. This announcement is for all the students and teachers. An emergency situation is taking place inside the school right now. All students must follow your teacher's instructions and evacuate. I repeat, all stu. Suddenly and without any forewarning, the sound of the principal's voice was cut off ominously, leaving all to question what happened. The answer to their unspoken question was given as low-pitched and horrendous groaning was heard across the school before the principal's voice followed. No, you stay away from me. Get back. Get back. Agok. For a full solid 10 seconds, no one said or moved an inch, too stunned by the awful scream before the sound of flesh getting ripped from bones resonated in their ears. At once, pandemonium erupted as students and teachers filtered out of the classrooms. In a desperate bid to survive, childhood friends turned and betrayed one another as one pushed the other aside in order to escape. A few people had unfortunately been knocked down on the unforgiving pavement, their heads stomped into bits as students and teachers alike rushed out into the hallway while not giving a rat's that they stepped on the body of some poor souls. In the sequence of chaos that had suddenly plagued the school, the ugly colors of a person's true nature was revealed as nearly everyone forgot their humanity, more concerned with their survival than that of their fellow friends and colleagues. Naruto grunted in annoyance before he turned to his horrified companion. Big Tits Sensei. I have to leave. Go inside the empty classroom right behind me and stay here in the classroom, I'll come back for you. No, she screamed before toning down her voice much more considerably. I'm sorry Uzumaki-kun, but I can't let you go out there all on your own. What if you get bit again and this time you turn into one of them? The ex-shinobi waved off her worries. I'll be fine. Don't worry about me. Whether it was guilt due to the blonde saving her at the potential cost of his own or because of the duty she felt she must uphold as a teacher or perhaps both, Kyoko didn't know, but she couldn't allow her student, even if it was the most irritating one, to be all by himself when in times of crisis. I am not leaving you, Uzumaki-kun. It would be highly irresponsible of me to let you go on your own. Naruto sighed but couldn't help but inwardly look at the older voluptuous woman in a new light. All right, but be very quiet and sneaky. I don't doubt that the school is already filled with those, we'll just call them zombies for now. Kyoko nodded before her gaze turned wary as she eyed his bitten wrist. Just keep me updated on how you feel with the bite. If we're lucky and that seems to be the case, perhaps getting bitten doesn't necessarily turn you into one of those things. Naruto nodded in return at her reasoning but disagreed with her last statement. He was a bit of a special case. Sure, he was no longer a Jinchuriki and yeah, his chakra coils were damaged beyond repair, but he was an Uzumaki. A clan renowned for their strong life force and longevity, not mentioning, as he had later found out, a reincarnation of the sage's younger son. He may not be able to utilize his chakra anymore, but that hardly meant that the other gifts his blood had gifted with him would dissipate. Naruto hadn't turned because his body had probably already finished combating and defeating the disease within. The joys of being an Uzumaki. All right, Big Tits Sensei, let's go. He commanded, silently walking to the nurse's office with the auburn-haired teacher following right after him. A protruding vein appeared on Kyoko's forehead. She glared lividly at her most troublesome student. Stop calling me such a derogatory name. It's Hayashi-sensei to you, Uzumaki-kun. Naruto chuckled. Kyoko-chan works perfectly for me, and please, call me Naruto. Tendrils of the ancient and primal emotion slithered and moved with purpose, brushing against his heart and bringing about the unpleasant thoughts that he tried to force away about whether Shizuka Marikawa was alive or not. Naruto Uzumaki wasn't a fearful person by nature. Even before his unexpected arrival in this world, there was hardly anything that terrified him back in the elemental nation. The short list of things that scared him only became shorter once he was here. And it was expected, really. When one had the power to absolutely destroy a meteor of all things, there was not much that could scare that person. Even though that was no longer the case. But now, having reached the nurse's office nearly 30 minutes ago, Naruto was both dismayed and simultaneously relieved to find his closest friend in the world not holed up in her office. Seeing the broken windows, the absent medicine, the corpses and blood that littered the floor, it filled Naruto with a sense of deep apprehension that he thought he could never experience again. He swiftly moved past the horrified Kyoko, prompting her to follow him and pulling out a combat knife from under his sleeve, killing whatever zombie that got too close to them, attracted by the noise of Kyoko's heels thudding the floor, not paying any heed to the shock and slight wariness of his teacher as he searched around every hallway and in every classroom for the woman who he owed an unpayable debt. The tendrils of fear, already wrapped so meticulously around his heart, constricted painfully, squeezing with increasingly intense pressure as time itself stretched apart. As the seconds dragged into minutes, Naruto only grew to find himself more frustrated and panicked over his failure and incapability to locate Shizuka. The fear in him growing, cultivating, until it evolved to become terror. That was the feeling that was running down his veins. Terror. Uzumaki-kun, are you alright? An admittedly stupid question to ask in a zombie apocalypse, but Kyoko couldn't help but blurt out her concern, no longer capable of remaining quiet after noticing for quite a while how her most troublesome student was unusually quiet and serious. "I'm Al." A scream pierced the hallway, interrupting Naruto, who reacted swiftly by picking up Kyoko bridle's side, ignoring her protests before he dashed in the direction of the shriek. "Get away! Get away!" The screams, female in nature, grew increasingly louder as the former shinobi sprinted with impressive speed, turning the next corner and spotting the zombie closing in on the pink-haired girl shuffling backwards on the floor. Naruto unceremoniously placed Kyoko on the floor before he pulled out his combat knife, flicked his wrist and let go of his grip, watching intently as the sharp blade flew in the air before impaling and finding a temporary home inside the back of the zombie's head. Ah ha ha hhhhhh. Naruto barely managed to rein in the urge to roll his eyes as the same pink-haired woman he saved proceeded to scream her lungs out as the zombie slumped before falling down on her chest. His eyes trained in on the four other groaning forms of the undead, enticed by the fetching sounds of the glasses-wearing broad who finally zipped her mouth shut. Fortunately, her scream signaled like a beacon to other survivors of their location, and Naruto watched, relieved as he ran alongside Kyoko, as the form of the woman he was looking for came into view. Shoving all feelings and thoughts to the side, Naruto pulled out a second knife from within his sleeve before slicing the nape of the closest zombie around, returning it back to his sleeve after he took note of the three other undead already taken care of courtesy of Saeko, an orange-brown-haired, spear-wielding girl, and a guy with a bat. "Well, ain't that swell?" he thought sarcastically. Walking slowly to the pink-haired woman, Saya, if he remembered correctly, he ignored her trembling form along with all the other looks of wariness and distrust from the others as he knelt down, removing the knife lodged in the back of the zombie he killed before wiping the blood away with his sleeve. Standing up, Naruto ignored the crying form of Saya, now comforted by Saeko, locking eyes with the visibly happy but worried Shizuka and exhaling in relief as all the terror wound up inside him dissipated within seconds. It was 20 minutes later, holed up in the large room, that Naruto finally allowed himself to really relax as he quietly pondered on the recent turn of events. Looking at the matter analytically, the fact that not even a single police officer had investigated the school meant that their hands were full. And considering how quickly the situation deteriorated with going from one walking corpse to hundreds, there were no two ways about it, the city and probably even the whole country was already infected. And maybe even the world. Naruto grimaced at the thought. If the situation wasn't so dire and grim, Naruto might have been impressed at how quickly this disease spread. Considering before today, none, including himself, thought the world would now be also compromising of the undead. Turning on the faucet, he wiped away any residual marks of blood on his hands and visage, eyes darting to the bite wound on his wrist and letting out a short laugh of relief as the scar was already beginning to fade. Naruto was almost certain that he would be alright. Not having access to his chakra anymore didn't mean his body's natural vitality would decrease. But of course, there was no way to know for certain until later on after he was put through the circumstances of getting bitten. And fortunately, his body came through like he predicted. Though speaking of fortunate, Naruto muttered a quick prayer of gratitude to God as his nerves really were set to fry with how much he fretted and worried about Shizuka. It had been a long time since he had begun to panic and feel terror like he had over 20 minutes ago. Seeing her alive and without any bite marks helped put his heart at ease. Was a bit of a shame that he didn't really get the chance to privately speak to her, but the shinobi was patient. Exiting the washroom, the sound of talking reached his ears and Naruto walked over to the group, exchanging a nod with Kyoko before he stopped to stand alongside Shizuka. Saya closed her eyes in silent frustration. Medical logic doesn't apply to corpses that move around and attack humans, worst case they might never decompose. Decompose? He was confused. First things first, we find out if our families are okay, then we must find a safe place to hold up for a while. Saeko stated. Safe place. Naruto uttered the syllables slowly, dragging everyone's attention to him while he turned to his favorite nurse. Shizuka-chan, you don't think that purple-haired friend of yours will mind too much if we went to her place and also borrowed some of her stuff? Shizuka blinked. Rika, no, I'm pretty sure she wouldn't mind. In fact, I'd imagine she'd want us to go and also put her weapons to good use. Rei narrowed her eyes in suspicion towards the relationship the two blondes seemed to share. She opened her mouth only to close it as Takashi spoke up. Weapons. What kind of friend do you have, Shizuka-sensei? Oh, Rika's the best. Shizuka gushed happily, a cheerful smile etched on her features. She's from the military and she has a lot of weapons that she stores in her apartment. I have a spare key she gave me as she is usually away and it was up to me and Naruto-kun to clean up the place. Okay. What kind of relationship do you have with this delinquent? Rei could not hold back from asking, her curiosity shared and matched by the other occupants of the room as they stared curiously and suspiciously at the duo. Even Saeko, who had been around the pair, failed to understand the dynamic between them and wanted to know for quite some time. Inwardly grinning mischievously, Naruto decided to answer that question before Shizuka could respond. If you really must know, we're secret lovers, he said with utmost seriousness. Nani? Naruto winced and covered his ears as Rei, Kyoko, and Saya bellowed their confusion, muttering another prayer of gratitude that the room they were in was soundproof. Why? He had no idea and frankly, he didn't care. His eyes flitted across the rest and he could see Takashi and Kutra as he learned their names, gushing out blood from their nostrils while nodding approvingly at him. Saeko was the only one who didn't believe him, it seemed. Quite expected, as she was a regular victim of his pranking and was well aware of his mischievous nature. Though he knew it was a bad idea, Naruto could not help himself from expanding upon this fun and harmless prank. Me and Shizuka-chan even had a go today, she likes taking it in the rear. Interestingly enough, the fountains of blood that spurted from the nose and drenched the room emerged not only from Kutra and Takashi, but from Rei and Kyoko as well, who had massive blushes of their own on their features. Even Saeko and Saya were blushing. Suddenly, Naruto's danger sense went haywire. He shivered as the hair on his arms stood to attention. A positively evil giggle rang from behind him and Naruto gulped before he slowly turned around and wished he hadn't. Shizuka smiled brightly, too brightly, eyes closed as her shoulders shook in what was either supposed to be mirth or fury. Bam! It was fury. Naruto realized that the hard way as he nursed the comically large bruise on his head, wincing as he held his head and sent her an annoyed stare. Shizuka scowled and cracked her knuckles. She looked menacing, or to be more accurate, would have looked menacing if not for the fact that her face was drowned in a mesmerizing shade of a red rosé. That's not funny, Naruto-kun. The ex-shinobi pouted. I disagree. Look, we do not have time for this. What we need to do is take the keys to one of the buses, get out of here, go to Shizuka-sensei's friend's place, and get some weapons to defend ourselves. Saya interrupted furiously, returning the tense atmosphere to the group. While I would have been kinder with the tone, it doesn't change the fact that Takagi-san is right. Kyoko spoke up, the blush fading away as she rummaged through the drawers before finding the key to one of the buses. So let's not waste any precious time, we can't afford to in this perilous situation. Naruto looked around, seeing everyone puff up their chest in determination had him wondering if he was in some sort of anime. The synchronous reaction was too much. Well, if he really was in an anime, now would be his moment to shine. Alright, listen up, losers. Seeing the unhappy look in the face of his most favorite person in the world, he added. Except you, Shizuka-chan, you're awesome. Shizuka blushed before giggling lightly at Naruto's charm. Our goal is to reach the school bus and get out of here. We can go guns blazing even if we have no guns, but there are only God knows how many zombies out there. Our best approach is stealth, so minimize the noise and be quiet. He ordered. I'm sorry, and who made you boss, you delinquent? Rei looked at him challengingly, loathing the idea of having to follow the leadership of Naruto Uzumaki of all people. Takashi, Hirano, and Saya shared uneasy looks while both Shizuka and Kyoko looked conflicted. Only Saeko seemed unbothered by his desire for leadership. He sent her an unimpressed look. Me. Now unless you want itching powder stuffed down your gullet and green hot peppers strapped to your nostrils via tape, I suggest getting used to me taking charge. Understood. He raised his voice a little at the end. Rei paled and nodded her head rapidly. She may have detested the idea of Naruto leading them, but she detested being a victim of his brutal pranks even more. Wonderful. Naruto clapped his palms together before sending a cheerful smile towards his fellow students. I trust you all don't have an issue. The answer to his question arrived in the form of feverish shakes of the head and nervous smiles. Good. Then let's get out of here. Naruto declared as he slid the door open, stepping out into the empty hallway before he looked over his shoulder at his group. Alright, here's the formation, Triple Chin-kun. Naruto said while pointing at a visibly depressed Kutra. You're out front, put your skills with that weapon to good use. Hi sir. Kutra saluted him, his sadness disappearing as quickly as it appeared as he moved forward. Turning to Takashi and Rei, his lips quirked into a normal, yet scary grin. Rotten cheeseburger, annoying orange. You two will be together on the left side of the formation. Naruto ignored the growls and clenched teeth from the duo as his eyes descended on his second most favorite person in the world. Saeko-chan. Despite her greatest efforts, Saeko felt her lips get tugged into a smile. Yes Naruto. Be a dear and guard the right side. She nodded and moved in position. Shizuka-chan, Kyoko-chan, and Howler Monkey, seeing as you three are not the fighters in our group, you three will be in the middle while I guard our rear. Without fuss, they went into the center, Saya mumbling curses as she glared at the shinobi who didn't even notice her ire. Before we begin, is there anything relevant that any of us need to know? They react only to sounds. Saya declared. They each individually have the strength to break down a door, so avoid getting caught in their hold. Saeko added. Good to know. Naruto nodded at both of them. Although that sound theory will be needed to be tested out, there is no harm in being silent and stealthy. Now with that out of the way, let's get moving. This has just become 10 times harder. Naruto idly mused as another group, one they had saved, joined them. Survival of the fittest, he supposed. As Naruto brushed past the door, the metal weapon of one of the male members from the other group carried, banged lightly against the rails of the stairs, generating a loud echoing sound heard across the entire school campus. On cue, every zombie appeared and Naruto flamboyantly gave the man responsible the middle finger. Run! Takashi bellowed as he dashed forward, his form flanked by Saeko, who proceeded to smash her bakken into the gray faces of any zombies too close for comfort. Why the hell would you scream? Now the entire school probably heard you. Saya screeched at her childhood friend. Less talking, more running. Naruto barked, ducking underneath an arm swipe as he made for the bus. Air. The ex-shinobi grimaced as the sounds of screaming with maws sinking into flesh reverberated into his ears. If he had access to his chakra, protecting everyone would have been child's play. Leaping to the side from a zombie that lurched in the position he was formerly in, Naruto slashed at the gray-skinned cunt before he resumed his running, his impressive, otherworldly biology allowing him to easily make up the distance as he protected Saya, Kyoko, and Shizuka from any of the bloodthirsty undead from behind. Fortunately, the distance to the school bus hadn't been excessively far and Naruto stood guard in the parking lot as Shizuka entered, slashing and killing away at the nearby zombies with Saeko and Takashi assisting him in. Whoosh! A nail flew in the air before finding a home in the forehead of a zombie that got too close to Takashi for comfort. Naruto looked over to the open window and nodded approvingly at Triple Chin-kun before focusing back on the horde of undead that he needed to eliminate. A task that was none too hard for the blonde, who was already making swift work of them, slicing at their head and dancing around them for the fun of it. Suddenly, the sound of the bus came roaring to life, and Naruto had to grunt as his fun came to an end, cleaving through the horde with finesses that didn't belong to this world. Turning to the awestruck Saeko who had just mere moments ago witnessed his skill, Naruto flashed her a charming grin and bowed. After you. The president of the Kendo club snapped out of her stupor and couldn't help but send her friend an amused smile. Being a gentleman now are we? Better late than never, he replied while delivering a spinning hook kick to the temple of an undead attempting to jump him from behind. Saeko giggled before entering inside, Takashi followed soon after. Help us. Naruto paused as he entered inside, turning towards the direction of the cry and watching mutely as a group of students alongside Shido-sensei ran to them. Who is that? Takashi softly questioned. Shido. The teacher of classroom 3A, Saeko answered him. Everyone, we're ready to go. Shizuka announced to the group. Kyoko abruptly turned to the nurse. Don't leave just yet, Shizuka-sensei. We must wait for the other group to reach us. Rei went red with fury. We are not letting him come with us. Are you insane? Takashi looked at her incredulously before a hint of anger crept to his tone. We can't just leave them. Naruto interjected before the group could dissolve into an argument. We are waiting for them. While I am none too fond of that teacher myself, the students with him shouldn't suffer because of your grudge against Shido. Rei bit back her retort, crossing her arms underneath her ample chest before angrily looking away. Guys, we have lots of them out on the front. Shizuka panickily announced. The former shinobi gazed out front and true to the nurse's word, he could see plenty of those undead blocking the path to the exit. Then just run them over. Takashi replied tensely. Saya looked irritatedly at her childhood friend. Not an option, the bus will roll over if we don't do something about them. I will take care of them, Shizuka-chan, get ready to leave once they're on board. Naruto ordered before he jumped out, ignoring Shizuka's shrieks to get back in as he pulled out his twin knives before he leapt at the closest zombie around. Having trained extensively since the age of 6, the very art of fighting was ingrained into Naruto's very soul. He may have lost his ability to use chakra, yes, but years of practicing the katas, the motions, the muscle memory of stances and forms, they didn't just go away. No. Fortunately, Naruto still remembered how to kick and he did it pretty well. While it would come off as arrogant, the fact was, Naruto could face the most skilled martial artists this world had to offer and he would still emerge victorious even without his chakra. His skills as a hand-to-hand fighter were just on another world, quite literally if he wanted to brag. Against the most skilled fighters, Naruto barely broke a sweat, but against these bumbling, walking corpses, it was a slaughter. It mattered not that 24 of the undead circled the blonde in an attempt to feast on his flesh. Naruto was just too fast, too skilled, to be caught by the sluggish movement of the undead corpses that could be beaten by fresh out of the academy genin. Everyone in the bus watched silently, transfixed by the deadly display as Naruto danced and cleaved through the crowd of zombies. Yet despite their amazement and awe, one in particular felt her heart sadden at the reminder that for how close they had gotten, there was still much she didn't know about Naruto as she would have liked, much about him that remained a mystery she seemingly couldn't uncover. Shizuka snapped out of her melancholy just in time to watch as the second group arrived before the students began pouring into the bus and finding a seat for themselves. She barely managed to stop herself from shivering in disgust as Shido's lecherous gaze, hidden behind a warm facade, traced over her body before he smiled widely. Ew. I am grateful for your compassion, Shizuka Marikawa. He said with what he hoped would be a charming accent. Swallowing back the vial that she almost let loose, she gave a shaky smile as she opened her mouth to respond. And I would be grateful if you sat your skinny on a seat. Sensei. Naruto spoke from behind him, saving Shizuka the trouble of replying as he climbed up before glaring at the shivering form of the sweating teacher. Why yes, Uzumaki-kun. Shido stuttered before heading all the way to the back to keep some distance between him and the blonde menace. Naruto scoffed before looking over at Shizuka. Shizuka-chan, get us out of here and to Rika's place. He commanded softly before walking over to one of the empty seats and laying there. Taking a deep breath, Shizuka put the bus on gear and stomped on the gas pedal. The bus lurched forward in response, the sudden force on the pedal causing everyone to be pushed back into their seats as the large vehicle accelerated forward. She navigated the bus until it was on course for the front gate, eyes widening in panic at the number of living corpses standing in their way. They're not human, they're not human, they're not human. Shizuka repeatedly chanted as she applied more force on the gas pedal, smashing through them before the large vehicle reached and plowed through the front gate. To her and everyone's relief, the bus broke through the gate without issue and Shizuka spun the wheel to right the vehicle in the right direction before driving away, leaving behind a courtyard full of undead, once, normal students. Silence prevailed on the bus, whether it was due to shock, exhaustion, unfamiliarity, or a different reason altogether, no one knew. But regardless, a tense atmosphere clouded the air inside the bus and even Naruto, laid back and easygoing as he wasn't really in the mood to joke around. Unfortunately, not everyone was in the mood to pipe down and relax. Sonoda, never one to read the mood and also lacking any sort of semblance when it came to manners, tched rather loudly. Where are we going? And why do we have to go wherever you guys want? Couldn't we have just found a well-supplied room and stayed there until things settle down? Yeah, one of the students from Shido's group, a small homo sapien with seemingly no redeeming qualities, quipped in. It would be a lot safer than just randomly driving on the road. Naruto inwardly rolled his eyes at the statement. That sounded like a brilliant idea. He thought sarcastically. Saya looked over at the pair with clear annoyance, her thoughts unknowingly mirroring the blondes. Have you both forgotten that it was you all who ran to us? She stressed that point, ignoring the growling of the larger man as she hmphed. Takashi nodded in clear agreement. That's right, it was you guys who made the choice of leaving school alongside us, we didn't choose for you. Evidently, that was the wrong thing to say as Sonoda's eyes narrowed in rage. What did yo? Shizuka slammed hard on the brake, almost knocking the delinquent over as she unbuckled her seat and turned around to let her ire be known. That's enough. I can't focus on driving with you all yelling. Her outburst effectively stunned everyone inside the bus as it was a first that they had witnessed the incredibly kind, patient, and soft-spoken woman lose her composure. The only one unfazed by the rare display was Naruto, who had most of the time seen and a few times been on the receiving end of Shizuka's temper. There was something else instead that occupied Naruto's full attention. Namely, it was Shizuka's fat shapely that swung in the air, bouncing with a vigor that had his mouth watering. Watching those huge tits as they stopped their incessant wobbling before coming to a complete stop, dangling in the air for all to see. Naruto stifled a groan as blood rushed down to his junior. Shizuka was definitely bigger than Tsunade in the department. Single quote. 2. He thought with a perverted grin. But while Naruto feasted his eyes on the buffet of enormous, everyone else was preoccupied with other matters in mind. Sonoda clenched his jaw and looked away. So tell me, what do you want to do? Saeko asked him sharply, arms crossed as she eyed him stoically. He gritted his teeth as he eyed her, gaze still filled with barely repressed rage. I just can't stand this guy, he declared while pointing his fingers at a perplexed and surprised Takashi. Me. Takashi stuttered in surprise. The hell did I ever do to you? I don't even know you. Bastard. Sonoda roared before he lunged forward only to kneel on the ground as Rei slammed the back end of her spear into his stomach in the same fashion a baseball player would slam their bat on the baseball. Puh. Sonoda coughed saliva before Rei threw him on his back with her spear. Ouch. Can't imagine that being too good on the pride. Naruto mused as he gazed at the groaning and down form of the dyed blonde. Rei wrinkled her nose in disgust. Asshole. The sound of clapping filled the air and Naruto had to roll his eyes as Orochimaru 2.0 dramatically walked into the scene, stepping over Sonoda and gracing the childhood friends with a large and nauseating fake smile. Wonderful work, Miyamoto-san, exemplary even. You took action when the situation demanded it, but that now begs the question, who must we rely on when a situation calls for immediate and swift action? After all, in order for us to survive as a group, We must coexist and function well together, and that can't happen if we all take different actions of our own. We need a leader. Kyoko narrowed her eyes. And let me guess, the only one qualified is you? She questioned sharply, not amused with his obvious agenda. Why, of course, Kyoko-sensei. Shido nodded with that disgustingly fake smile still plastered on his ugly mug. I am an adult, and while you and Shizuka-sensei are adults too, Shizuka-sensei happens to be the only one who can fill the position of being our doctor. I won't disagree with you there, nor on the idea of needing a leader, but what makes you think I shouldn't lead? She challenged. Shido smiled condescendingly. The answer is simple, and do forgive me if you feel insulted, but the position of leader belongs to the one most competent. He answered while throwing a hand back towards the students he saved. The proof is right here for you to see. I helped save those students. One by one, the features of the students saved by Shido contorted into one of helplessly blind admiration, the sheer abundance of respect and happiness present in their visage making everyone else not part of the slimy teacher's group want to gag. Kyoko lost the ability to speak, remembering clearly how she was all but useless the entire time. Hell, she had been the reason that Naruto got bit. Eyes widening in remembrance of the incident, Kyoko had to stomp down on the urge to ask and unintentionally expose Naruto about his current condition. All the turmoil and chaos had caused her to forget about the matter altogether. Vowing to privately question her student later, the least she could do with how he heroically saved her life, Kyoko glared at Shido as she tried desperately to think of a rebuttal. Only to come up empty-handed. Seeing as though he managed to render his greatest opponent speechless, the smile on Shido's lips spread an inch wider. And I'm going to stop you right there, asswipe-sensei. Naruto suddenly interjected, causing everyone to peer at him in surprise before a few released muffled snickers at the derogatory name. First of all, you act as though we are all part of one group. He sighed dramatically and shook his head. Unfortunately, for you that's just not the case. I say, and second of all, Naruto callously interrupted, it's as you said, if we are to do the whole leadership thing, the most competent for the job should be leader. Being an adult doesn't mean jack shit. Silence reigned in the bus after that statement. Shido waited a few seconds more before he tried to make his opinion. BTH, and finally, another round of suppressed snickers emerged, and even the professional Kyoko had to bite her lips to prevent her laughter from being heard. Up on the front, Shizuka struggled to bottle down her amusement at Naruto's antics. It was just like him to purposely antagonize someone. Our group I mean, Naruto said while gesturing to the members of the original squad around him. Already have a plan in mind, so we don't need any guidance from you. Not that anyone from our group wants your leadership, to summarize, since you have an up there for a head. We have two separate groups, you aren't the most competent, and we are currently pursuing our goal. I think that's pretty simple to understand, right? Karma truly was a bitch. It was now Shido's turn to be speechless. The teacher offered a shaky smile before recognition suddenly dawned upon him and his lips curled into a malicious smile. And tell me, Uzumaki-kun, seeing as we are two separate groups, how is my group meant to survive if we have no resources, no weapons, nothing to guarantee our safety? You wouldn't sentence your fellow students to death, would you? Naruto scoffed. You can have the bus once we reach a certain destination. Saya immediately hissed and stood up. And how will we travel? Shizuka-chan's friend, Rika, has a big Humvee that can easily fit all of us in. Crossing his arm, Naruto sent Shido a soul-crushing stare. Also, nobody from our side said that the other students can't join our group, we just have to discuss it first. You on the other hand are a definite no. Though, judging by how those students are looking at him as though he is God, I know for a fact that they won't join us. Shido gritted his teeth furiously before he whirled around and headed back to his seat. The ex-shinobi chuckled out loud. It's good to be me. Ignoring the suspicious and curious glances sent his way as he stood up, Naruto walked over to Shizuka and perched a hand on her shoulder, gaining her attention before she quickly returned her attention to the road. Naruto-kun. The ex-shinobi leant down to her ear. It's better if we stop here and leave by foot. He whispered. Quite a few hours had passed by since everyone had boarded the bus, nearly everyone sitting down and still resting mentally after the whole bloody ordeal with the undead. To say that things were tense was putting it lightly. No one inside the bus had said a word after Naruto had put Shido in his place, everyone too distracted by their own thoughts to socialize. Not that anyone would want to, considering that the relationship between the two groups were extremely strained. Needless to say, everyone inside couldn't wait until they no longer had to tolerate the presence of their rival group. Sadly, with panic and chaos ensuing on the streets, a ride from the school to Rika's home that would have taken at most only an hour, was extended to a several few. Shizuka blinked before her voice dialed down extremely low so no one else could hear them. But why? We're only around 3 kilometers away from Rika's place. That's why I want us to leave Shizuka-chan. If we get dropped off right at the entrance of her home, not only will Shido know where we're staying, but we also risk other survivors seeing that and trying to attack us, that's not mentioning those zombies who are attracted to noise. A worried look crisscrossed her features. Do you really think people would become that violent in just a single day? Unfortunately, yes, he answered before leaning back. A few seconds of silence passed before Shizuka looked at him from the corner of his eyes. All right, Naruto-kun, I trust your judgment, but I want us to talk later, preferably tonight, just you and me. Naruto sent her a small smile. Anything for the woman I love. His proclamation, though quiet and unheard by everyone except for the woman he was speaking to, still produced a pink hue on her cheeks. Baka, that's not something you can just say so casually, and certainly not at this time. The shinobi chuckled quietly. I guess, I do have my reasons though. Another few seconds passed before Shizuka fully turned to him, her expressive hazel orbs flickering to meet her favorite pair of sea blue eyes momentarily before she turned back to the road. You really love me? She asked in the softest of tone. With all my heart and soul. He answered genuinely. An exasperated yet fond look graced her eyes as she shook her head and smiled widely. You and I are gonna have a long conversation later, mister. Naruto grinned, gripping onto the metal pole right as Shizuka dug her foot into the brake and stopped the bus before getting off the seat. Naturally, such a move caught everyone's attention. If I may be so bold to ask, what are the two of you discussing and why have we stopped, Uzumaki-kun? Shizuka-sensei. Twisting his neck so he could gaze at the one who addressed them, Naruto's grin only widened as he took note of the signs of nervousness that clung to Shido's form, the teacher's confidence leaving him once confronted with those deadly eyes. We're leaving the bus, my group is, we're pretty close to the place and we don't need the bus to reach our destination safely. Saya instantly approved of the blonde delinquent's plan. I agree, and I believe I speak for all of us Shido-sensei when I say that none of us are willing to stay here any longer. Her declaration was followed with everyone in their group standing up, each of them in their own silent way conveying their desires to be away. Only Kyoko, out of the entire group, looked conflicted at the idea of getting away and leaving so many students in Shido's clutches, but one glance at the nauseating expressions of admiration and hope that those students held for Shido and she managed to steel her resolve. Shido laughed. I understand, my dear. After all, Japan is a free country, and there's no forgetting the argument that Uzumaki-kun made from earlier. Still, for the sake of the many students here, the ones you're willing to abandon. He smirked cruelly, yellow eyes alit with maliciousness. I'd have to ask on their behalf, can any of you consider staying? There's strength and safety in numbers, and with society deteriorating, we must look after one another. Surely some of you wish to help them, yes. I know that you're a caring woman, Kyoko-sensei. Said woman frowned, knowing the kind of angle that her fellow teacher was going for. And of course, Shido's lecherous gaze shifted to the voluptuous nurse, not giving Kyoko the chance to respond, his tongue skidding across his lips as he admired Shizuka's otherworldly curves. You care about them too, Shizuka-sensei, it is why you've been studying to become a doctor. Would you not be willing to help me care for these precious souls? They need you. Everyone in the Naruto squad grew even further disgusted by the man, Rei scowling hard while tightening her grip on her makeshift spear, ready to put it to good use, while Kota clenched even harder on his nail gun. Shizuka reeled back, shivering at the slimy man's disgusting and blatant ogling. Enough. Naruto interjected firmly, glaring dangerously at the male teacher. I will not have you try guilt trip anyone in my group into joining you so you can use them. Turning to Shizuka, Naruto sent her a reassuring nod, one that helped her regain her bearing. Shizuka-chan, open the doors, we're leaving. The blonde nurse immediately complied, allowing the former shinobi to shift his attention back to everyone else. For those of you who belong in Shido's group, this is your one and only chance to come with us. The man you all view as leader is nothing more than a venomous snake. As Naruto had theorized hours ago, all the students admired Shido too much to even truly consider his words, it showed in their raging uproars. You take that back, you son of a bitch. Shido-sensei is the greatest human being ever. You want us to follow you. The biggest delinquent in face of the world. Shido-sensei is not a venomous snake. Don't you dare insult sensei. He's the most compassionate man ever. He saved us. Only delinquents like you fail to comprehend just how godly Shido-sensei truly is. Even more love-sick declarations would have followed suit had Shido's pleased chuckles not reverberated around the bus. Thank you for the kind words, children, but there is no need to be so angry. Everyone is entitled to their opinion, and though Uzumaki-kun's opinion is hurtful, he still has the right to think however he pleases. Stars glittered in the eyes of Shido's students as they worshipped the smirking man with their gaze. Naruto nearly gagged at the sight. Alright, I can't handle any more of this. Naruto squad, out of the bus. Everyone in said squad was more than happy to comply with their leader's order. Good riddance. Rei muttered loudly while glaring daggers at Shido as she left. Takashi followed right after before Shizuka and Kyoko joined them, leaving only Naruto, Saeko, and Kota left inside, the latter keeping his nail gun aimed right at the male teacher and his followers, much to Naruto's approval. Sending a nod to Saeko, who returned it, she followed suit with the others. Now only the shinobi and Kota remained inside. May I, Uzumaki-san? Kota inquired, bloodlust swimming in his gaze as he locked orbs with Shido. The shinobi gave his underling the thumbs up. Of course, the stage is all yours, my friend. Oh, and please, call me Naruto. Oh, is there something you wish to get off your chest, Kota-kun? Shido placed a hand on his heart, as though dreading what might come next. Only, the way his shoulders shook along with how his lips trembled between staying in a firm line and a smile easily foretold how the teacher found the situation amusing. You can tell me anything, Kota-kun, your safety and happiness is something I vow. Shido's words were cut off as a nail grazed his cheek, spilling blood and causing the teacher to nearly yelp in fright. I missed on purpose. Kota spoke quietly, rage bubbling in his chest as he glowered at the sweating man. The next shot I take won't be a miss. What? But you're not a violent student, Kota. You have always been a civil and polite young man. Shido uttered shakily, his amused smile having long since faded away. I tried my best to ignore the bullying, to ignore the fact that you turned a blind eye to my problems and even encouraged others to pick up on me. Shido paled as Kota's voice incessantly increased in volume. I was civil because I wanted a normal life. Even after all the times you bullied and made fun of me. Silence engulfed the bus after the roar. Naruto couldn't help but be impressed. Taking a deep breath to subdue his rage, Kota continued more calmly. But normal is not something we'll have ever again. This is your only warning. Mess with us and I will be the one to kill you, in the most painful way possible. Gulping, Shido shakily nodded. Placing a hand on the gun otaku's shoulder, Naruto sent him a nod before they both backtracked to the exit. Adios to you all, Asswipe Sensei and Asswipe Sensei's deranged cult. The ex-shinobi gave them a two-finger salute before both he and Kota finally left. Everything all right, Kota? We heard you yelling. Takashi stepped forward in concern. Kota rubbed the back of his head sheepishly, reverting back to his meek demeanor much to everyone else's amusement. He's good, he was just being a badass and putting Asswipe in his place. Naruto spoke on his behalf before he could reply. Which speaking off, Naruto turned to the gun maniac. That was pretty cool, brother. You've officially earned my respect. From here on out, I shall call you Gunner. Is that acceptable to you? Koda was moved to tears. Hi, excellent. Naruto grinned before turning to everyone else. Now I don't know about you losers, but I'm not really interested in continuing to stand on the road like an idiot. Follow me, please. Oh, and before I forget. The ex-shinobi turned around to face them. We'll also go to any nearby stores, get some necessities like food, medicine, anything important. That includes. Naruto eyeballed the pair of women that he came to associate with as annoying orange and howler monkey. The stuff you need for when you're on your period. If the two of you are annoying now, only God knows what kind of horror the two of you would be when you're in your period. If you're not already. Rei and Saya clenched their fists in fury, veins bulging all around their features. Before they could give the blonde a piece of their mind, Naruto raised his chin, smirked smugly and spoke. Make sure to keep the volume down, in case you've forgotten, our gray-skinned bumbling friends are attracted to noise. With the Naruto squad raiding a few abandoned stores, it took them a bit longer before they had finally made it to the residence of Shizuka's residence, having taken somewhere around an hour to an hour and a half until they finally reached their journey. Fortunately, they hadn't met any survivors on the way and the undead they had encountered were few in numbers. Made sense since nearly everyone was heading to the bridges to escape all the chaos. Now well into the early night, it came off as no surprise that after making sure that no one was inside the house that the first thing the girls did was claim the bathroom for themselves, calling dibs on showering first and forcing the boys to be productive in the meanwhile. That's how Naruto initially found himself wound up with Takashi and Koda, watching the pair amusedly try relentlessly to open the safe inside Rika's bedroom. He was more than content to just watch, but alas, Kyoko, the only woman who didn't get in with the remaining girls inside the bathroom, was intent on privately conversing with him. Naruto knew what the topic was about. It was obvious really. Truth was, he was surprised that she took so long to confront him. But hey, whatever. Which was why he currently stood face to face with the lovely, redhead brunette. He was just going to think of the woman as a redhead. Well anyway, he stood with her outside in the backyard, away from the curious eyes of everyone else. Kyoko-chan, how are you? He asked with a silly grin. Feeling her eyebrows twitch at the casual use of familiarity with her name, Kyoko had to resist the urge to scowl as her most troublesome student pressed her buttons. Uzumaki-kun, we need to talk. About your arm. Her eyes softened a great deal before she looked down in guilt. I'm so sorry Uzumaki-kun, you getting bit is my foul wa. What are you doing? Kyoko felt herself blush, scandalized as Naruto playfully pressed a finger into her nose before pulling it back. Naruto grinned. What do you think, Kyoko-chan? I just booped your nose. Be serious Uzumaki-kun. You can turn into one of those things and it's my fault. The shinobi laid a reassuring hand on the teacher's shoulder. You have no reason to worry Kyoko-chan, take a look. Pulling up the sleeve of both his arms till they rested on his elbows, he showed off his forearms, slowly twirling them around so she could see the bite wound. There's no sign of a scar. She murmured in shock. Fretfully, she grabbed a hold of his arms, bringing them to eye level so she could examine them closer. She took her time, looking all over his arms again and again. There's nothing. I remember seeing the bite wound on your left forearm, and yet there's nothing. How? Kyoko let go of his arms, so utterly surprised by the unexpected twist. The answer is pretty simple, Kyoko-chan, it's because the scar has healed. Huh, oh, didn't I tell you? I'm an alien. Kyoko blinked. Having a good idea of what probably would come next, Naruto covered her mouth with his palm just as she bellowed. Huh. He grinned while returning his hand back in place. Surprise. What the hell do you mean by you're an alien? This is no time for jokes, Uzumaki-kun. Okay, fine. I'm a ninja from a different dimension with all kinds of special powers, he said with a snicker. Kyoko clenched her jaws in frustration. For the love of all things holy, can you just be straight with me? Naruto lost his cheerful deposition as he eyed her seriously, causing the redhead to nearly step back in surprise. Alright, the truth is, I don't really know how or why, but ever since I was a kid, I learned that I had a strong healing factor. Naruto half lied and half spoke the truth. It's been like that all my life, and I never brought it to anyone's attention because I know it would bring me the wrong kind of people into my life. The best lies always had a grain of truth to them. While he found the act of deceiving the teacher distasteful, Naruto wasn't anywhere near comfortable disclosing his origins to Kyoko. I know it sounds unbelievable, but you're now a witness to my healing abilities. How else could I have not turned into the set? Naruto breathed deeply and looked away, putting all his acting skills to use in an attempt to deceive her. All I ask is that you don't tell anyone, please. Snapping out of her shock, Kyoko looked at the blonde conflictingly. The teacher in her understood his reasons for not wanting to disclose about such a personal matter. She wasn't blind to the corruption of the government and even the regular person. Perhaps it was a bit cynical of her to think in such a form, but there was no denying that had her students' healing abilities become public knowledge, he'd have to constantly look over his shoulder. Yes, she understood why he was so wary. However, for him to be able to heal from a bite wound and not turn like everyone else, such an ability at the present time was extremely important. This pandemic was already causing severe damage and it was just the first day. But despite that, if Naruto were to allow himself to be subjected to experimentation, they could end the pandemic. They could develop a cure. That's right. He's the cure. Please, Kyoko. Her student's voice brought her back to reality once more. Gazing into his sea blue eyes, usually alive with unforetold amounts of mischief and joy, now soft, pleading, fragile, Kyoko felt her heart melt. Okay, Uzumaki-kun, I won't tell a soul. This I vow, she declared genuinely. Was she a fool to make such a vow? Yes. Yes, she was, but she was indebted to him for saving her life at the risk of his own, and even forgetting that, Kyoko couldn't recall a single time that Naruto had ever looked at her in such a way. Looked at her with such a vulnerable gaze. What kind of teacher would she be if she refused him when he needed her? Not the good kind, she knew that much. Naruto smiled gratefully. Thank you, sensei. Despite her greatest efforts, Kyoko felt her lips get tugged into a smile as she sent him an exasperated look. Now you choose to address me respectfully. What can I say? I'm just that special. Kyoko nearly rolled her eyes before her countenance turned serious. Uzumaki-kun, I won't tell a single soul as promised, but I personally think it would be a good idea to at least inform Marikawa-sensei. She could possibly develop an antidote from you and you already trust her. I plan on telling her soon. He admitted much to her approval. So, now that we've concluded our discussion, a playful look crisscrossed Naruto's features before he waved a hand back and forth near his nose. Get your. In the shower, you stink. Snapping out of her shock, an affronted look entered her visage. How rude, you and I are gonna have a long conversation, young man. Yeah, he waved a hand in disinterest. Get in line, now go, spend time doing girly stuff with the other girls in the bathroom. Shooting him a glare, Kyoko huffed before walking back in. Letting loose a snicker, Naruto walked back in, curious to know if Takashi and Kota had made any progress with the safe. He tried his best to not think about the moans emanating from the bathroom, lest he be tempted to peek. Arriving in the room, Naruto tched and shook his head in an exaggeratingly disapproving manner. Why am I not surprised that you still failed to open that safe? I expected better from you both, rotten cheeseburger, Gunner. I'm so sorry, Naruto Taiko. Kota bowed his head, tears spilling from his eyes. Gritting his teeth, Takashi glared at his senior. I'd like to see you try and open the stupid safe, and stop calling me a rotten cheeseburger. Why do you even call me that? Naruto sent the teen a disbelieving look. Are you an idiot? The answer is pretty straightforward. It's because your personality is just so boring and awful, just like a cheeseburger that's way past its expiration date. He answered while walking to the safe. Now, if you gentlemen don't mind, I need a little spa, aha ah. Miyamoto-chan. This is so inappropriate, aha aha. Comma. Like a set of dolls, Naruto, Takashi, and Kota turned their gaze to the wall, as though they had X-ray vision and could peer right at the source of those noises. Closing his eyes in thought, the ex-shinobi nodded in approval. Kyoko-chan has definitely joined the party. Grinning pervertedly, Kota nudged Takashi in the shoulder. Think we should check up on them? You know, just in case. Takashi bashfully looked away. As much as I'd love to sneak a peek look, I don't want to risk death knocking on my door. Grunting in annoyance, Kota turned to the blonde. And you, Taiko? I'm unfortunately going to have to refuse as well. Right now almost all the girls in the group are annoyed with me for one reason or another, don't want to fan the flames even more despite the fact it would be more fun. Naruto rubbed his head sheepishly. But anyway, I have a safe to bust open. Grabbing the steel pole, Naruto propped it in place and with a hard pull, opened the safe for their viewing eyes. And that, my minions, Naruto said while gesturing inside to the weapons and other, exciting accessories, is how you get the job done. Hate him or love him, there was no denying that he was effective with his work. A round of applause greeted his ears. Time skip. 2 hours later. Leaning on the rails of the balcony, a frown crisscrossed Naruto's features as he heard all the groaning and screams a bit far away inside the neighborhood. With his biology, all of Naruto's senses including hearing exceeded that of a regular human, and while it was normally a gift, at the present moment, he thought otherwise. Not even a sadist would enjoy the kind of pained screams that the thousands of civilians had been releasing today. And while the volume was dull and low, it still painted a good picture of what kind of horror was going on. The kind that he unfortunately found himself unable to prevent. The ex-shinobi barely quelled the urge to sigh. If only I could use chakra again. So distracted by his thoughts, he grew unaware of the world around him till he felt a pair of arms sneak around his midsection along with a pair of mounds pressed on his back. Naruto's eyes widened slightly before he shook his head with a small chuckle. Shizuka-chan, how many times did I tell you not to do that? You remember what happened the first time, don't you? A giggle was the answer to his response. He shivered as he felt her breath on his neck. Sorry, but you know I like huggy hiccup. The delinquent blinked before he turned around to face the busty nurse. Are you drunk, Shizu? Yup, you're drunk. Naruto deadpanned, ignoring the subtle way her words slurred and the hiccup, along with the smell of alcohol. It was easy to tell the older blonde was intoxicated judging by the flush on her cheeks along with that look in her eyes. Not mentioning her interesting state of dress. From what he could tell, the only piece of article thing she wore was a long white rag wrapped and strained around at her and ending at her upper thighs. Please tell me no one else saw you in just a towel. Shizuka felt another giggle escape past her lips before she leaned her head into Naruto's chest. Are you jealous? Just a little. Don't worry, no one saw me, everyone except the two of us has already fallen asleep. The girls are all sleeping inside the guest room while Takashi and Kota are sleeping inside the living room. I see. Naruto hummed curiously before he wrapped his arms around her in a hug, perching his chin on top of her head. Probably a bad time to say this, considering you're drunk and all, but I'm really glad you're okay. Shizuka's lips tugged into a smile, one that spoke of her melancholy. I feel the same way, you have no idea how scared you made me, you silly boy. I couldn't find you no matter where I was looking with Saeko. The younger blonde's eyes softened. Sorry for worrying you so much. Her voice began to crack slightly. Be baka. No point in apologizing, you always make me worry so much. I suppose you have a point, still I'm sorry. Naruto rubbed her back soothingly, kissing the top of her head. Shizuka-chan, I know we said we'd talk tonight, but I'd rather do so when you're not drunk. Shizuka only hugged him tighter. It's okay, I just want us to stay like this. You and your love for cuddling. Naruto smiled fondly before it shifted to something a bit more teasing. Still, isn't it a bit inappropriate to cuddle when you're only in a towel? Taking a step back so he could see her face, Shizuka bit her lips seductively and smiled, a forbiddingly alluring glint nesting in her honey gaze. Come now, you know I don't care for how I dress when it's just the two of us, and are you really complaining about me being in just a towel? I'd be lying if I said I wasn't enjoying the view. Naruto admitted, almost shivering at the seductive look in her gaze. That said, I still remember you saying in the morning that we'll be having a long conversation because I looked at your ultra big. Doubt you'd suggest this if you weren't drunk. I trust you, she proclaimed genuinely before her tone took a bit of a teasing edge. Besides, we've cuddled hundreds of times, and I remember not all of them had me being dressed innocently. A towel isn't so bad compared to some of our previous sessions. True, in that case, Naruto scooped her up bridal side before he began to walk. I don't see a reason not to cuddle, but let's do it in bed. Not exactly interested in standing outside for hours. Shizuka swooned playfully. What a man, carrying me like this. He only chuckled and shook his head. It still threw him off how Shizuka always underwent a complete 180 whenever she was drunk. From a bit shy and innocent, to teasing and downright seductive. Gently laying her down on the bed, Naruto affectionately kissed her forehead before he got up and walked over to close and lock the door. Oh Naruto, why are you taking so long? Naruto's sweat dropped. It was only a few seconds. Give me one moment, Shizuka-chan. Heading to the closet, he picked out a random pair of undergarments before strolling back to Rika's bed. I know a towel isn't so bad, but assuming you fall asleep, you'll be once the towel unravels. Shizuka giggled. And what's the problem? I know you like looking at my body. I love looking at your body. Naruto corrected, joining the woman in bed while handing her the garments. How shameless. Shizuka let loose another series of giggles as she graciously accepted the pieces of fabric before pinching his cheek, much to his confusion. You said my butt was ultra big, you're such a naughty boy. She purred before letting go. The ex-shinobi rolled his eyes and looked away. Shizuka-chan, quit wasting time and get changed. She pouted. Fine, but only if you promise to hug me good for the rest of the night. Done. Naruto instantly agreed. He couldn't say he found an issue with her stipulation. While not something they did too often, it wasn't uncommon either, as Shizuka had a bad habit of, like 3 out of 6 times, falling asleep on him after a good cuddle session. And it wasn't like he was immune to the whispers of the dream world. There were times where he too fell asleep alongside her, and it always culminated into them being a sleeping pile till either of them woke up. That was off course without mentioning the few times when they would watch horror movies together, getting scared half to death. Shizuka would always refuse to allow him to leave and would force him to sleep with him for the next few days until she would finally get over her fright. Naruto didn't have an issue considering they had slept together many times. It was only a first that he was going to sleep with her when she was drunk. I'm done. That took a bit longer than usual. He shifted his body around, throwing his shirt away before he lied down on the mattress, gaze flickering to the seductively smiling nurse and inwardly whistling at how good she looked. Clad in a lacy blue bra and panties, Shizuka's, massive and milky, looked absolutely mouthwatering. Each shapely orb nearly the size of her own head and pressed together as they were, produced a delicious cleavage that seemingly had no end to it. Sadly, in her seated position and with him laying down on the bed, Naruto couldn't get a good view of her meaty legs or her beautifully oversized rear, but that was alright, he could still gaze at the pair of large mounds on her chest that he called heaven. Enjoying the view? Shizuka asked with a light laugh, wobbling her chest for his viewing pleasure. Naruto grinned. I am. Good. Shizuka giggled as she grabbed the blanket before she lied down and snuggled up to him, laying her head on his upper chest while covering their form with the bedspread. Unable to resist, he wrapped one arm around her, nearly sighing contentedly as Shizuka happily leaned further into his embrace. Thinking about how the entire day had gone, he peered down and breathed in relief. He had lucked out when hundreds of thousands hadn't. I don't know what I would have done if something happened to you. Naruto lightly dug his fingers through her hair. I know what you mean. Shizuka quietly admitted, her seductive persona momentarily foregone. I was so scared that something might have happened to you that I just didn't care about what happened to anyone else. It's heartless of me to say this, but anyone could have hiccup. D died and it wouldn't have mattered to me. Naruto blinked in surprise. Really? He felt her nod. Remember how a few months ago on my birthday, you said that I was the most precious person in your world? I do, and that hasn't and never will change. He declared earnestly. Shizuka smiled softly, butterflies flying in her stomach at his sweet words. She raised her head, cheeks flushed from intoxication as she met his eyes. I feel the same way, you're the most precious person in my world too, now and hiccup. Forever. Naruto returned her soft smile with one of his own, heart drumming happily in his chest as he gazed at her hazel pools for eyes, filled to the brim with boundless affection. Only one thought flashed through his head. Oh dear God, I'm hopelessly in love with this woman.